goes a lot easier this way. I've just been like starting it right off the bat, and people are like, "Oh, this works," and we just like jump into it. But yeah, how's the gym?
Man, it's been good. Just trying to find help more than anything. You know, we're running kind of lean. I always tell my guys, I'm like, we're like one COVID away from like chaos, but our clients are chill, man. They respect us. They know we work our ass off for them. So, if things get a little crazy, they're in our corner. So I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah,
But athletes keep rolling in. So unfortunately, we got a good relationship with a PT that deals with a lot of post-op ACL. So we see a lot of the ACL kids, which I love and hate. It's really great to get them back, but at the same time, I'm like, I just hate.
yeah,
These kids only get 4 years in high school. You miss a season with ACL. It's huge. It's huge. So
yeah, definitely. How like soon are they sending them over to you?
we're getting pretty early now. I mean, I would say some of them come in like 3 months, 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's
we've built trust. I mean, we work really well together. We know the ortho that's doing a lot of the surgery, so we got a pretty good chain of command as far as just taking care of these kids and getting them back.
mhm. Is it
Um,
more like girls or guys?
we see a mix. I mean, it's definitely biased towards females,
Hmm.
but more guys for sure than I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like just that age, and is there like a specific sport that they're playing? Have you
All
noticed?
over, man.
Just all over, like
Yeah.
just snapping ACLs left and right.
It's devastating. We've got one girl. She just tore her ACL last week. Yeah, it's been about a week now. She just had surgery. It's her second ACL tear, contralateral side. It's just fluke, man. Like she got bumped in the air, landed, and that was it. Like it's just the nature of sports. Like they're chaotic, and she's probably one of our strongest, most explosive athletes. We rehabbed her first ACL. She was an absolute rock star.
Mhm.
Had no reason to think she was a candidate for any of that. Symmetrical, you name all the tests. Like she was blowing it out of the water. But you get a little contact, and sometimes it's unavoidable.
Yeah, freak accidents, man. Like that's why you can't. I think I've been trying so hard not to say the words like injury prevention, like because there's just no such thing. Like you get hit by a car, you get hit by a car.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, your best bet is to be a bench warmer, and then you just don't see the field, and you never get hurt.
Right? Yeah, just be a kicker or a punter and
Just be totally average.
totally average across the board. That works out for you. Dang, man. Well, I'm curious how like your rehab or I mean, not necessarily rehab, but like
Mhm.
continuation off of their rehab. Like, are you just blasting their hamstrings and quads? Like, what is it?
We
Especially at like
definitely,
3 months. Like,
yeah, yeah. So we definitely do a lot of hamstrings for sure.
mhm,
They need that. I think it's an active restraint to tibial translation. So I mean that's kind of obvious. So they've got to get that stronger. We are seeing a lot more of the quad grafts. So there's been some issues as far as just getting quad strength back, being able to do some hypertrophy stuff. We delay like open chain stuff, like your leg extensions, for quite a while.
yeah.
We just started dabbling with some blood flow restriction stuff because they can do low load, but they need some hypertrophy. So we're gonna kind of start working with that to see if we can, get some muscle mass back a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
While they're still under some restraints. But other than that, one of the things that I think I see a lot of is just, if you want to get into like the biomechanics of it, a lot of these kids are just sitting in a ton of external rotation. So there's some A to P compression, everything rolls out, and they just have trouble finding their insteps.
Mhm.
Whether it's lack of IR at the hip or they just orient out. So with that comes some IR substitution strategy. So we're just trying to clean those up. So I mean, the simplest way is like we teach the kids like manage, stack, start there. Well, because they can't do a lot of knee bend, like half kneel stuff, we'll do a ton of split stance. And if they can capture good hip and foot cues, we really start to rebuild that pattern. And I emphasize it early on, like, hey, like this is the foot position. You're going to need to, you know, turn yourself around in a cut. You can't be rolling to the outside of your foot. You've got to learn to capture that instep.
Right.
So it makes it super easy. So even with, just some, whether it's just landing, we'll just have them hop through a ladder where they're just basically stepping one foot to the other just to land and work on capturing those foot cues a little bit quicker. You got your med ball shakes, fake med ball throws. We can start to work on some of the foot cue stuff there. So, I mean, to me, it's just pretty simple. It becomes very iterative in terms of like we're chasing the same things just with a lot of different looks. So, whether it's a rotational med ball throw to begin teaching cutting without the velocity, or a split squat where they're learning how to translate that tibia forward authentically. I mean, it's pretty simple. I think people get caught up with it. And I try to be very pragmatic because my coaches are young, and to be honest, they probably just don't geek out as much as I do.
Yeah.
With some of the stuff. So, I try to make it very simple to execute as long as they can understand some of the big rocks. I mean, we're really helping these kids and making a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I find like the more simple you can make this stuff, the better. Like I don't know, what do they say? It's like you go to a course and it's like you really only take home like 30% of it to like actually be like applicable.
Right.
Especially for like the population that you have. And it's like you're working with a young population to begin with this stuff. And then you got young coaches. It's like, do you really need to throw around like compression expansion model, like crazy stuff at them, or just be like, find your end step, here's your cut, like you were saying? Like they're going to resonate with that like 10,000 times more.
Yeah. I mean, I still try to like communicate to my guys some of these concepts, but I don't want them to get buried in kind of the middle zone that confuse complexity.
Right.
I want it to be simple, but not simplistic. So it's kind of just this elegance, right? Like once you start to really understand, it's like we're chasing some pretty simple things. And, I'll explain to them, I'm like, look, like these 8 activities, they all look different. There's different stances. Some you might see as a horizontal pull, a horizontal push, but, we're still using the same cueing. They're still getting the same position. They're getting the same look. So, in that sense, there's just a level of redundancy to it.
Yeah.
But it just ensures that, we get what we want. The athletes don't get bored doing the same thing, but, we can still train everything we need to with, just across the whole workout. So it's pretty simple, man. I mean, training I think people complicate it. It's probably one of the easiest things to do. But, again, to me, it always just comes down like, I just need to be really pragmatic. I love going into these rabbit holes. I love the PRI stuff. I love the expansion compression. I think intellectually it's challenging and it gives me some different things to look at, but I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone of having gone, too complex with this when, as I start to like kind of peel the layers back and evolve my understanding, the application of it becomes very simple. Just a few things to pay attention to. And in most cases, you're going to make some forward progress. And that's one thing I think I try to communicate to them is, look, like you'll see, we've got these tricks, or we can do this thing, and it's going to give you a ton of hip IR right away, but it doesn't stay. So it's like, they got into these problems over time. These were evolutions. Like we're not going to perfect this with 3 sets. So just appreciate, like, I need it to be a little bit better. I'm not fixing every single thing, every set. I need them to kind of hit a few things when they stabilize, position, technique under whatever load there. We'll look at the next few cues if they're relevant. So
yeah,
it's just, I don't know, man. I'm kind of vanilla to a fault, but it works. So at the same hand, I'm just like, you just get really good at watching like beginners do split squats. Like I've seen a million split squats this week.
Like, so that's really it. So I guess I'm always interested in how people, because it cracks me up when you look at like PRI and it's like, okay, well, PRI isn't training. It's like, all right, I get that, but the biomechanical models behind PRI, or even like expansion compression model, which is going down that whole rabbit hole of like Bill Hartman stuff, but taking those things which are supposed to be rehab concepts, but then getting them to be applicable with athletes, right? So, I mean, you're training, younger, like collegiate, high school athletes, and then even professional athletes with, Cincinnati Bengals right there, which that should be a good season. Houday, right? but how the hell, like, do you feel limited and not being able to use maybe some of these like table tests or utilizing, some of the lower level activities that you would see
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
typical rehab stuff? Or do you feel
Mhm.
like you get more changes by loading the crap out of people and like making them do cuts?
Let me declare my biases first. So I do mentoring with Bill,
Yeah.
and one of the focus points that I wanted out of apprenticeship was to see more things at speed and off the table.
Mhm.
And we do work with a lot of performance athletes, so that is my end goal. For a lot of people listening, compensatory strategies have a very negative connotation, but in sport and in performance, they can be useful up to a point.
Mhm.
Your best performances are going to have tons of extension, anterior orientation. And so you have to appreciate what these athletes need to get those levels of forces. I kind of view a lot of what we're doing as giving them back some of the capabilities that they don't have. So, certainly for my younger athletes, they need more force production, they need reinforcement. But my NFL guys, like, they move the worst. Like, you know what I mean? They are
Yeah.
terrible, which is great because there's very low hanging fruit for them in terms of making them feel better. And a lot of times, so I use this example a lot. So we had a lineman and we had running backs. They're both super compressed. They both don't have a ton of rotation. My lineman, my goal with him was to give him enough rotation to be able to train and do what he needs to do pain free,
Mhm.
but not anymore. I don't want him to load particularly well into rotation because that's a guy who gets turned, right? I want some of that orientation. I want some of that drop off of hip IR. I want him to be a wall, more or
Mhm.
less. So it was like we had to play with that. I just didn't focus on that stuff as much. Again, we had to get him out of some pain. He had some anterior knee pain. He had some, cartilage issues just that have built up over time. Because I mean, you play high level in college, you play high level in high school, like you're getting busted up.
Yeah. Do you think
Um,
that's some like specification that's happened as well? Like you're just kind of loading the same structures over and over?
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, the more you orient, the less rotation you have, the less tissues and pathways or motor units you're going to use. I mean, you kind of get this repetitive loading pattern. I think it definitely contributes to some
Mhm.
problems. When people talk about variability, I think it gets really confused. But like the true definition, if you really look at the research, is there's variability between repetitions. So if you're watching somebody squat, the specific motor units they're using change just a little bit rep to rep, and that's what kind of allows that stress to be varied. And I think the more compressed you get, I think you probably have less of that. Again, this is just thought experiment.
Yeah.
But what I see is the less movement options people have, the less joint range they can access. It seems like they just kind of end up in pain. Like the
Yeah.
one strategy they have is the only strategy they have. Um, so yeah, with him, like I just didn't give him. We gave him enough. We got him feeling a little bit better, but that was it. Like at that point, it's kind of like we want to start progressively loading. We want to work on this stuff, but I don't want you to spill into further
Mhm.
compensation. Now the running backs, my goal with them was a lot different. I wanted more hip IR. I wanted them to be able to load cuts, to stay low, to be more maneuverable in the box, especially. So I mean, the outcome was different. So again, it's like I wanted to use some of these compensatory strategies to our advantage in the case of the lineman. And just, with the running back, like if I'm looking at the spectrum, I just want them to be a little bit farther in one direction in terms of how much mobility they have. Said another way, I mean, we have some dancers like, that's all orientation. That's the only way you can really get that much range of motion.
Yeah.
And so it's like we have to manage that. But I think I've heard Eric Cressy say the things that make you spectacular make you susceptible. So I'm not trying to restore perfect range of motion. It's not going to be perfect stack. So in a lot of cases, you know, using some of those like rehab type exercises becomes very difficult. Plus, I've got kids that we work with, like their attention span. Like I ask them to do a breathing drill or sideline, and it's talk time, right? Like that they're completely not doing it. So we have to figure out different ways to do it. And I did the same thing, right? Coach was like, go stretch. And we just do things that look like stretching, but nobody was, it's just part of being that age.
Yeah.
So we just have to come up with different things. And honestly, like it's simple. Like one of the easiest ways I think is just using cables that are overhead. It unloads your body weight a little bit, allows you to capture position. We can put them on the ground in like an oblique sit, doing a pull down or something, and they're going to get more of what we need. So it's just a matter of, if I need them to stay there longer, well, they're doing 15 reps instead of 8.
Go for like an AMRAP. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's totally fine. I think again, it's like, well, it may not build force and explosiveness as much. I'm like, look, this looks like a beginner. Like they've had 3 months in the gym. Anything is force producing at this point. Like I can put them on the assault bike and their power output's gonna, improve. Like they don't even need to lift. But and I feel like such a traitor saying this, but I'm kind of a recovering meathead. And the more I'm doing this, like I don't think top end strength has the value that I thought it did for a lot of athletes. I hate saying that, man. I feel like I feel dirty saying it, to be honest, because I love to deadlift and stuff, but the NFL guys that I look at, like they're not weight room strong. I mean, they're strong. They're stronger than your average person, but I mean, a lot of the guys we follow in powerlifting circles, I mean, even the average ones are crushing their numbers. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, how strong does somebody really need to be? And I think the way that I try to wrap my head around it now is strength is, numbers on a bar. It's how much you lift. Whereas what I'm really chasing with an athlete is force application.
Right.
And I think again, for your complete neophytes, they definitely need some strength training. But I think the more that athletes develop, I really think the strength training becomes more about, slowing things down so we can capture, say, foot cues or positioning with slower velocities. I think it's good for the tendon rehabilitation and extensibility, and just kind of just building some foundation. But I don't know that power stuff in the gym doesn't compare to sprinting. The velocities and the power outputs are just so far apart that I'm not sure that they've got as much carryover. So, we've been really kind of shifting a little bit away from strength and heavily focusing on more of the sprint stuff, whether it's change of direction. I mean, all of our athletes still lift. We're not at a stage where we're totally ignoring that and going complete full Franz Bosch.
Yeah, right.
But it's definitely changed my thinking, and I think taken away a little bit of my own urgency and desire to like please parents by showing them that their kids are getting stronger, and really looking at, okay, what do these athletes need to do well? Well, I want them to be fast, because you don't really have time to show strength on the field. It's strength is slow. There's no time constraints. And what we're always up against with speed stuff is, okay, you get faster. Now you have to move your limbs faster. You have to apply the same force in less time, or more force in the same time. So it's always under some kind of time constraint. And I think as we've kind of made that shift, it's just allowed us to honestly, like with a little bit less lifting, I feel like our athletes do move better.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I was all over the place there.
No, I mean, it makes sense to me. And like when you say it out loud, and I'm with you on the aspect, especially with like force application. Like, I think that is a good way to describe it, rather than just saying like top end strength. Like, I think there's a time and a place for it, but in a real world setting where, you might only have a couple months with a kid, like, is that really going to be the best bang for your buck? Like, you're not doing probably 12 months of programming for these athletes. Like,
right. They're taking some time off.
Yeah. Like if you could, maybe like top end strength would be, there. Like I could definitely see that, but it's just like, man, like what's the lowest hanging fruit? And I'm totally agree. Like you got to keep your speed. And why would you make someone slower? You know, I mean, heck, man, I've been doing a bulk for months now. And as I've gotten heavier and all like stronger, I've definitely slowed down. Like I went
Yeah.
and like sprinted with my niece and I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm slow. Like I'm not like turning over like I used to at all. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, I couldn't imagine making a high school athlete feel that way. You know, like that's not the goal with what they're doing in their sports.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. It's wild, man, to make the shift. And I think about it a lot. And, just, kind of circling back to some of the ACL stuff. One of the things we started doing earlier was just a lot of lower intensity, extensive plyometrics. So just getting them some extensibility back through those tissues, working on the bounce earlier, because first couple times we went through, we were a little gun shy with that. I think, yeah, obviously we're still slow to return with some single leg stuff.
do you mind explaining the like extensibility, like
Just
that word?
extensive. So, I mean, if you've seen like the plus plyo stuff, I would say like they're light tier. So short ground contact times. We're not getting a ton of height, but I just want just quick little pogos or whatever it is. And we'll do different things with their feet, crisscross, split stance, you name it. But all 2 foot contact, 2 foot takeoff, 2 foot landing. So jump sleeps, whatever you want to refer to it as. But we've just done a high volume of low intensity work. And I think it's done wonders for getting athletes the athleticism back, because a lot of the hop test, it's a single hop or it's strength, symmetry is what they're looking at. And we've gotten athletes cleared. And then I remember Abby, my one who just unfortunately tore her other ACL, I was looking at her like 9 or 10 months out. I'm like, you just look heavy on the ground. Like you're just not getting off of the ground. And so, we had to spend another 9 months before you just know it when you see it, right? You just hit the ground like a bouncy ball, you fire away. So we started getting that stuff back in a lot sooner with our athletes. And it's done wonders for just how quickly they're recapturing some of that athleticism. So now as we kind of build that up across their rehab, when they get fully cleared, we're able to go back into some more aggressive plyometric stuff right away. And they just look totally prepared for it. I feel like they're getting a lot out of it. But, I tend to be a guy who really wants to set a big foundation. I love aerobic work. It's super boring to do. I love a lot of low intensity plyos. They kind of get boring after a while. And I'm talking, we'll do like, we call them either like aerobic plyometrics, which I think is all the way back from Joel Jamieson's like conditioning stuff is kind of how he introduced it. We'll do 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of that continuous. And jump roping's fine if you're listening to this and don't have anything. And then, as we kind of start to layer in more intensity, it's just like that connective tissue, the Achilles, the shank, the entire lower leg is just prepped. And truthfully, for a lot of my lifters, so, the clients I coach online, they're also somewhat recovering meatheads and they want to feel a little bit more athletic. We start to introduce that stuff a lot. And it just seems to be really good, because once you're in the gym too long, it's just like, you're not used to using connective tissue in that way. And it's super easy to like blow a hamstring or, trying to play in the over 30 pickup league.
Right. Exactly. I'm getting there, man. Like I turned 30 this year. I'm like, like I'm heavier, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, but I definitely have lost some of that athleticism. So like you talking about this, like I use plyometrics still in my own training and even with my clients, but it's exactly what you said. It's that I'm going to do 8 reps of like max explosive broad jumps or something. And it's like, I take a second, I explode, and then I like take another second, explode, and do the movement. Whereas and I think that preps me really well for strength work, 100%. And like gets the the nervous system, all that prep for it. But maintaining athleticism and the bounce, I like what you're doing there. And I think I'm definitely going to try that out in my own training and kind of see if I can get rid of some of this heaviness that I have at the moment. I don't know. I'm also just like I'm getting tubby now. I'm like, oh geez, man. Like, so
yeah, you're gonna so that can have that like love chub after you get married, right?
I don't know. I forgot. Someone just posted. I think it was. Are you familiar with DJ Marikama or like Strong Camp?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He posted something, and it's like when you hit 30, like, or the average age when you're 25, or average weight that you are when you're 25 is like 185 for a 6-foot male, and then at 30 it's 200. I'm like, I mean, I've definitely put on more muscle, but I'm like 205 right now. Like, am I just a statistic? Like, I don't know.
Those charts are for normals, not people who weight train.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping it is.
That's what I always said.
I need some they need to put some body fat percentages up there or something, because I was questioning my approach there for a couple hours.
After I got married, we had some sheet cakes, but our primary cake was this raspberry cheesecake. And we had so much left over, and I'm just like, I'm a sucker for cheesecake. So I think I ate cheesecake for like the next month straight and did not care. I bet I put on like 15 pounds.
Jeez, man.
And then I was like, I just kind of woke up one day. I'm like, all right, I'm going to polish this cheesecake off, and then I'm like going to get my shit in gear. But yeah,
it just happens, man. You know,
it does.
It's like, you think about nature, like if you were just a wild human back in the day and you found a sheet cake, like you wouldn't give two shits. You'd just be eating that thing the whole time. Like, there's like the raccoon in my backyard. Like, he gets into the garbage and he's like, let's go.
The feast. Yeah.
The feast. Right.
Yeah. To your point, man, it's like, I did bodybuilding way back, like high school, early college, and kind of found my way to powerlifting, strongman. And honestly, like, I love muscle mass, but I didn't love being huge and trying to get bigger. Like, it always I just like feeling athletic. I always wanted to look like a defensive end or a D-back, you got muscle, you got strength, but you just, you move like a freaking ninja. So
yeah,
it's trying to figure out what that looks like. So training's, my training these days is kind of across the board. It's like, I still want to retain some muscle, but I'm not trying to put on a ton of size. Like, I'm definitely not as strong as when I was at my peak in powerlifting, and like, just mentally still struggle with that, but definitely way more athletic, move better, feel better, and just not carrying around as much muscle mass. Cause man, when I was, I'd be getting ready for a meet and I'd go over to like one of the breakfast joints and be ordering 2 entrees. I'm like, this is silly. Like, the whole MO was like mass moves mass. I got 5 pounds left in my weight class, so I'm just going to pile on until the meat gets here. And I didn't like being bloated and stuff. So
that's my life right now. Like, I'm literally on this call with a protein shake right next to me. Like, just there's 1,200, 1,400 calories in this. I'm like, ugh, like you're talking about sheet cake and it makes me want to throw up right now.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean, back in college, like I did the whole like 10,000 calorie a day, endeavor for like 6 weeks. And I mean, it was just disgusting.
Oh, that's not sustainable at all. What were you eating, man? You had to be like Burger King 3 times a day.
Well, that's when Arby's had like 5 for $5 beef and cheddars. So that was lunch pretty much every day.
Ugh.
And I mean, it just got to the point where you're just like, because I'm in college at the time, so you got a ton of time to just sit around and do shit. I mean, you're just like one bite at a time. It takes you like 3 hours to eat this, and I'm just like so disgusted with myself.
Jeez, man. I mean,
I'm like,
at least like Chipotle is a thing now. I will say, I was listening to this podcast. And are you familiar with Alex Hormozi? He's like making a big push on social media. He's like a business guy, but he got started with gym.
Oh yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about now.
Yeah, he was talking about how he could I think he was eating Chipotle twice a day, every day. And then his accountant was like, "You've spent thousands of dollars at Chipotle." And he's like, "Yeah, so what?" And he's like, "I could get 50 grams of protein with each meal at Chipotle, and it was faster than me making a meal." Because he's like, constantly working, all that stuff.
Right.
I was like, I get that, man. Like I probably eat Chipotle at least like 4 times a week. Like just handle my money.
Yeah, I always like if I'm really trying to put on size, you get the bowl,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
you get the extra rice of both kinds, both
Tortilla on the
the like
side.
just double tortilla, double
Yeah.
wrapped, and
God.
then yeah, it's disgusting.
You go in there with like your gym clothes on and you start ordering like that, and the guys are like, okay, here's a little extra rice and protein.
Yeah,
It's like, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
yeah,
Um,
they
they,
know.
they know. So kind of getting back into, the original question of just like applying these, biomechanics, rehabilitation type
Mhm.
things in a more dynamic setting. I mean, is there, I guess, you're talking about like having too much muscle mass or having too much of this like compensation can be detrimental.
Mhm.
Now you're looking at it as more, it sounds like your job is more just instead of providing more of like a performance enhancement, it's like you're trying to get them to take a step back so that way they can then perform better almost.
Shoot, yeah. Let me try to unpack this a little bit. I think it's safe to say, without I'm not knocking muscle mass. I think in most cases it's
Right.
valuable,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it is compressive by nature. I mean, you've done a lot of compressive type exercise to get there, and I think for a lot of it, so let me start with like my elite athletes. They've got a ton of development. They've had a ton of training.
Right.
It's very easy to unlock just a few things and exploit what they already have.
Mm-hmm.
Those NFL guys, man, like, they've got so much power, so much force. And if I can just give them, a little bit better position. And in general, I think the goal is bring their center of mass back a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at their feet, they're walking around like they're in the squat rack, shoulders back, chest out, hips tilted forward. I mean, some of them
Yeah.
you can rest like a 2-liter on their buttocks because they got so much anterior orientation. You start pulling the center of mass back just a little bit, things feel better. They can do more of what they need to do. And again, I'm not trying to pull it back to this perfect position where their center of mass is directly beneath their feet and, whatever. But a lot of these guys are in like they got a very like late foot.
Mm-hmm.
That big toe's pinched all the way in. Sometimes they got the hammer toe because they're just literally putting the brakes on because, I mean, they're ready to go. So that's easy. Now, some of my younger athletes, it depends. You'll see some kids who they're not strong, and they're already having issues managing kind of their center of mass. They're a lot of the ones who you just know, like they're not born, like they're not elite. They just they're having trouble managing, whatever force and power and speed that they have, which may not be that much. So, for them, it's more like we've got to give them strength and teach them, speeds and positional stuff, and just understanding the technical aspects of speed. And ultimately, like it just becomes, we're trying to teach them to manage that center of mass just a little bit better. So strength seems to help. It just gives them a little bit more force production to understand what they're doing. It does take a little bit, if you're not a strong person, it's hard to work through certain things. I mean, we're talking about kids who aren't even strong enough to really do single leg stuff like a split squat. So, in that case, it becomes, more challenging. But again, we kind of slow cook it. Like, I'm not too worried. Like, as long as you're feeding them the right things, you have to allow time for things to develop. And, I really try to communicate that with parents and with clients that I work with, because I think people want like this quick fix. And, most of my high school boys, like, if they spit, hair is going to grow. So it's like, I can do literally anything and their vertical jump's going to go up. So I don't want to get caught up in this game of like, so-and-so, like their vertical jump increase, like they move like shit and it doesn't matter. And they're probably going to get hurt, but whatever. Yeah. It's like, we can train you intelligently. We can give you the capabilities to control your body, to make really great foot contacts, to make, have good change of direction skills and understand how to authentically change levels and not just throw your trunk forward. And at the same time, you can still, get vertical. So it's just, I think for most people listening, like you have to get really good and probably patient with watching beginners do the same things over and over, because 95% of our kids are hitting a lot of the same basic exercises, but we're just just incrementally progressing them.
Right. I mean, okay, two questions. Those
Yes.
kids that are, you're saying like, okay, they're just not going to be like elite levels potentially,
Mhm.
right? Like we all know what you're talking about. Do you find that they are kids that maybe are like either one super specialized in one sport and like didn't have enough time maybe playing just random shit like back in the
Mhm.
day? Like, is that something like a correlation you've kind of noticed?
Some kids I just think
They right,
they
there's
just
just
don't
a
have it.
genetic aspect.
Yeah,
Or
the
like
the
they're
issue.
probably going to be like those late bloomers where their true strength and development like aren't going
Yeah,
to hit till like
yeah, for sure.
20, 21 or something.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's a handful of kids where they are super specialized, and I'm like, look, you've missed a lot in terms of the different movement problems that
Mhm.
different sports have afforded you. You've missed out on different movements and skill sets from not playing different sports, different strategies. Like there's just so many different things that you can develop doing different sports. So it's like training is here to fill empty buckets, to start to give you things that you do not have, that you do not get from your primary sport.
Mhm.
Training is now your second sport. And I try to really communicate with that to the parents and to the kids. Like, if you want to continue this and you want to do this at a high level, this needs to be, the second sport for you, because we're going to help you get better and do what you do better. So
Mhm.
I tell them, I'm like, I don't care if it's with me, I don't care if it's with somebody else, but like, you need to understand the whole process of getting to the next level. This is going to be a difference maker for you.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that becomes our goal is, all right, if I've got a hockey player, what are the patterns he's in? How can we start to correct that? Basketball players, they've got their subset of injuries you expect. They got the jumper's knee, the stiff ankles, the,
Mhm.
longer spines, more issues managing, a trunk of that size. So it's like, we kind of work with that. Our soccer players are, especially our females, they're going to have a cleat on the turf. We've got to teach them really good change of direction skills. So it's just, we start to fill the gaps with that and look at where we can. And, whether you call it low hanging fruit or high leverage points, we try to look at each athlete and it's like, what's the biggest impact we can make for this kid that can really propel them forward. And so we just kind of keep reevaluating and, attack different things.
Mhm. How long do you think it takes? You're trying to talk about these just being patient. Like, are you talking, you know, like, and obviously, like, each kid's got a certain set of time, but like, say you wanted to see like a true adaptation,
Mm-hmm.
like, are you talking 3 months? Are you talking 6 months of like the same thing? Like, what's that looking like?
Oh, I mean, we definitely periodize it in a sense,
Hmm.
and I would say it's a lot of it's same but different.
Right.
Generally speaking, when I sit down to program, I think in blocks, about three mesocycles back to back to back,
Hmm.
and trying to chase certain adaptations. So, and depending on how advanced the athlete is, you could kind of go through it sequentially. So, your first block could be something where you're working on a lot of, early phase of gait, where maybe we've got the tibia behind the ankle and they're working on just, capturing the positions there, opening up some range of motion. And then maybe in block two, we're going to work more mid stance and where they're trying to apply some downforce, get some authentic pronation. And then maybe in that last phase, we're going to really try to drive that tibia forward over the foot and work on more propelling and pushing off, because that's probably the time they're going to go into sport. And so we want to give them those propulsive capabilities. But a younger athlete or somebody who's new or somebody who's heavily compensated, we might spend two or three of those blocks, working on early and mid, and then maybe just a little bit less on that propulsive side, because they tend to go there anyway. And even with sprinting, they're still getting that. So, even though I say it's like block one is early, like every activity is not literally early. It's
Right.
just maybe our strength training exercises kind of
Just
center around that. Maybe, yeah,
bias that direction.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we try to keep it, again, just try to keep it super simple. But I think that perspective and that progression of how to move through things is really useful. And, there are certain joint positions and ranges of motion that we're going to capture at each phase. So it's, again, kind of looking at what do kids need? What are they missing? And then just what kind of stances can we use? What kind of positions, what kind of postures are going to allow us to acquire those? And so we just try to keep it really simple on ourselves. But, most people block one, they're getting, we're just trying to pull them back, control the center of mass. It could be something like if we're doing a low cable split squat, they've got a cable pulling them forward. Their tendency is to shift back a little bit. That can go a long way in terms of just really capturing position. But more so, I'd say, for your adults, somebody like us, it's just cutting out a lot of the dumb shit.
What's the dumb shit?
Just everything everything just everything being I say you turn everything into a deadlift, right? So it's like people trying to load everything as heavy as possible, throwing the trunk forward. It's like there's different buckets. Broadly speaking, we got an output bucket. I'm less concerned, when people are doing their heavy bilateral stuff, I'm less concerned about perfect squats and how squatty versus hingy is it. I'm just trying to throw some weight. When we get to the sensory stuff, some of the unilateral, some of the single leg, that's the time you want to feel particular muscles. You want to try to maybe improve hip extension or hip internal rotation. But I think appreciating that dichotomy for like an average person is a really great way to train long term, because you get your opportunities to kind of to bro out, to show out, to send it, and then just understanding, the role of the rest of it. So, try not to deadlift everything. Don't turn your split squats into deadlifts where, you're holding your breath and you're grinding through it. And I don't know, man. I really try to keep it super simple. I think, we can talk about a lot of the nuances of any of it, but at the end of the day, it's just, very simple progressions for us, very simple cues, and just, really owning the position is kind of what we go for.
Right. Definitely. No, I mean, I've definitely noticed a similar experience when you're talking about, especially periodization in that aspect. It's like, I'll go heel strike, mid stance, toe off for 3 blocks. Right. And like you said, there's just some people, especially with a population that might be a little bit more rehab at times. Instead of, going right into that mid stance phase, it's like, let's hang out and do 2 phases of like heel strike, 80% biased kind of stuff. Like,
right.
Let's stick there. Let's do more expansive work. Let's crank up the reps, and is it really heel strike or expansive or whatever you want to call that? Or at the end of the day, are they just building a huge, maybe sort of like baseline, somewhat aerobic foundation and coordination? I think you're just getting a lot of that happening all at once. So I've loved Bill stuff, and I love thinking in that process, but at the same time, it's like, what else is happening too?
Yeah.
With compression and expansion, like just thinking of coordination, especially like, those younger athletes, it's like, they just need to play and like do different sports in some ways, or like you said, like training's now their second sport. Like, that makes complete sense to me. And I like the way you said that too. Like I'm going to definitely steal that.
You should. It's a good one. People, it just resonates with people, right? They're like, oh, okay. I'm not going to play 2 sports. I'm a sophomore in high school. Like, I'm not picking up a new sport at this time. There's no chance I'm going to make the team. But kind of to your point, as you were talking, something that popped out too is, with some of these kids, it could be lack of coordination. It could just be no control of their body. It's, we're going to give them more reference points, more points of contact with a wall, or more points of their body touching the ground, until they demonstrate that they can manage it and show some force production without losing control, whatever that looks like to you. It could be just, the rib flare. It could be as they row, their shoulders hiking, whatever you want to think about that as. It's, I have no problem giving people more points of reference until they can really execute it. And I always try to make it simple for our athletes in terms of understanding like what is required of them. And I tell them, like, look, my rule here is you show me you can do the easy things, and I will make it harder and harder until you get at the level you want to be at. And so, in all of this talk and doing early stance and stuff, like, we're not training tenderly. It's hard.
Mhm.
It's difficult. I'm going to make, you're going to feel exactly what I want you to feel. And usually our block one, we have more tempo. It's tough stuff, but it really helps establish, criteria moving forward about what this should look like and feel like. And they're getting really clear about what muscles are working. I just want them to develop some kinesthetic sense of what we're trying to accomplish. And so, I kind of put that little carrot out there. It's like, hey, you can get through this and you can do it well. Like, we're going to keep bumping this up. So I think there's always a level of challenge that I'm requiring people to meet. But at the same time, like, I'm going to be somewhat of a gatekeeper in terms of, like, you got to demonstrate some competency here, right? I'm not just going to just throw shit at you and hope it works out. So,
Right. Do you think that the professional side of things, like the professional athletes, do they still need some of that kinesthetic and coordination aspect as well? Or are they just, do they have that capability, but with compensations?
man, it can vary. So, I mean, I think their nervous system is just wired different. I mean, I watch them figure things out in a set or two that might take somebody, a normal person with no experience, 3 months to get. Their brain. I think the best explanation I've ever heard about sport is a problem with a movement solution, and their capacity to find movement solutions is just, it's phenomenal. I mean, I remember watching somebody trying to figure out the RDL without using a ton of anterior orientation, right? So instead of just extending the lumbar, to actually learn how to keep, the rib cage down, not overextend, and actually move into the hips. And just watching them figure this out over like 8 to 10 reps was remarkable. I'm thinking, gosh, damn, like, that is so impressive, and that's a very simple problem. You think about what they've got to accomplish and the speed at which it's happening. It's like, okay, like, I get these guys are just wired completely different than your average person. And they've trained that as well. So, they've got some natural gifts. They've had a tremendous amount of training, and it's cool to see, honestly.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Like, to just them playing, like, yes, they have the gifts, but they do have, well, probably a lot more experience with this stuff to some degree. Like, whether that's them training on their own or even having other professionals like talk to them. Like, I mean, even when I was like a trainer, when I was first starting out, like, I moved like garbage. Like, I think back to it and I thought I was hot shit. And it's like, no, I was not at all. Like, I could hardly find, hamstrings ever. Like, when I think about it, it's like quad dominant, everything. I had no glutes, no hamstrings. And it's like, it took me some time to like truly figure it out, and it's like your body doesn't know what it doesn't know. But I guess that is something that makes these like professional athletes like a higher level, is that they just have such a, like, maybe I don't know, like their superpower is their kinesthetics, but also having the experience on top of that. Just, I mean, just makes them good at what they do.
Yeah. And we'll still add more points of reference to them if they need, there's, again, as compressed as they are, like, I don't mind using the ground to help create some shape change, right? To move a ilia to try to capture some IR. Again, I don't need to go into detail with that. I'm like, here, just lay on your side here like this, and you'll feel your hip. You got it. Okay. Now row. It just becomes very easy. But the thing that's nice for them is, I think, because they do have a really developed sense, it's funny because they'll be like, let me see that one more time. And then they'll like execute, you know what I mean? Like, they tend to be very visual and kinesthetic. Yeah. So I'm conscious not to just always describe things to them, but I'll show them. And then once they feel it, it's like, it's locked in at that point. So it just helps. Again, you have less degrees of freedom, less things are moving, you can hit the target tissue, and they like a good pump. I mean, they're 20-year-old boys, you know, and they're grown men, but like, I mean, let's be real. Like, I mean, we were that age. Like,
what do you care about?
Your brain is not, you don't have full executive function until like 25. And it's real. Like, I see this. I remember being there. I remember the first time I like delayed impulse. I'm like, oh, that's what it's like not to be a complete maniac. And
Yeah.
I see these guys and I'm like, oh my God, like, I was so excited to like train my first professional athletes. And I'm like, man, what the fuck is wrong with, I don't know if I can
Yeah.
cuss. I
You're
was
good,
like,
man.
what is your fucking problem? Like, this is a terrible idea. Like they
Right.
wake up late. This was during quarantine. They started coming to my garage. They'd wake up late, come flying in on two wheels down my neighborhood with their, Dodge Charger. I'm like, first of all, bro, you got to slow down. Like, there's kids here. Then, he's like, I didn't eat, but I took 3 5-hour energy. I'm like, well, you trying to blow up? Like, what is your problem? But then, and this is a crazy thing, I'm telling you. So, one of them's on the assault bike. We're doing these alactic sprints. Like, they're only like 6 seconds. Okay. So he's going, this was the day he had his 3 5-hour energy, goes in the side yard, pukes all over the place. I'm like, all right, he's done. No, he gets back on the bike, hits the highest wattage I have still seen. Immediately after puking, I'm thinking, like, these like built different, like that's built different. And for the record, it was over 2,500 watts. I mean, he came back and just blasted it. I'm like, I didn't even know that thing could move that fast. But over time, I've got them to be a little bit more aware of, some different things. I think they've grown and matured and been around other professionals in the league who've told them about longevity and how to do this. And, there's a lot of things to learn, but, it's with any athletes. I mean, there's a whole element of recovery and self-care and just, repeatedly doing things at a high level that I think, kind of precede a lot of the success that we're going to have. So I've been very fortunate with the clients, the athletes that we've had. Just from a business standpoint, we don't really work with teams because I felt like there was always a few kids who just were there because there's always that implicit, like, coach wants you there.
Yeah.
It's not required, but it's expected. And we kind of drew a line in the sand and said, okay, we just want kids who, raise their hand and say, I'm ready to train. I want to get better. I want to be a starter. I want to play in college, whatever it is. And so I think that environment we've definitely protected that culture and the kids that are there, just really feed off of each other. So it's been lucky from that regard.
Definitely, man. No, I think you guys, not only do you have the most beautiful gym in all of Cincinnati, for sure,
Thanks,
but I really like what you do, man. I think it's incredible, everything that you put together. I think last question I have for you is, do you use any like objective testing? Like, a lot of what you're talking about, like, it just comes with experience. And I've also figured that out. And it becomes like an art form in many ways, like being able to actually make sense of this, watch someone move, and not just have to rely on like a table test and you're just like, well, they need this, like more of this type of stuff. But is there a way that you maybe like objectively test like have you heard of someone like testing like kinesthetic awareness? Like, is there something like this professional athlete like scores like 10,000 times higher on than like this kid who's just starting a sport? Like,
no, man, and that actually hit a really good point, because I've been thinking about, a lot of our professional peers do testing weeks, where they'll have their high school kids, they'll come in and they'll test. And I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't know that there's like a test or even just a series of tests that aren't arbitrarily chosen that we can say with extreme confidence are really difference makers. And again, it's like we can see vertical jump improve from not training to start training. We can
vertical
see
jump improves with just like anything anymore. Like,
it really does.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. But
no. And, even with speed, it's like, do I want to get like the binary app and break down every angle, stride? I mean, is that relevant to my coaching, to the experience our athletes are having? To what extent is it useful? And then, sometimes it's like output data is, let's say we do a 10-meter sprint. It's like, well, okay, they got faster, but, are they still accelerating at the same speed at that point? Is it really what we want? So, in the other side of it is, I don't know if I really want to lose training time to test a
Right.
series of things. So, I'm so back and forth with it right now, in terms of how we implement this in a way that is useful, provides constructive feedback. And I think, to your point, illustrates that we're making progress with our athletes. Because, how do you, hey, they move better? Like, what is that? Like
Well, it's like
that.
being comfortable with not, I feel like I definitely like was this way. And when I first started training, and, even well into when I started, like, was training in even like my physical therapy program, like, it's all about like, well, you have these tests that we do and they're arbitrary things. It's like, how's your balance? How's this? How's that? And it's
Yeah.
like, are we just getting better at the test, or are we actually getting better as like being a human being?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't know what to use as well. And that's where, from the art form that is coaching, like, you can tell when someone's better
Mm-hmm.
and they've made improvements and they're faster, but they're not just faster in a linear direction. They're like, they can move,
Yeah.
but you can't quantify that in a lot of ways, at least with what we have,
Right.
like,
Yeah. There's always going to be limitations, because, any test is constructed to some degree, right? Um, in terms of like what's known and unknown, they probably know where they're going,
yeah,
when they're going, how they're going. Where sports, you don't know any of that,
yeah,
right? Like, I don't know when I'm going to make a run, or when this person is going to make their move and I've got to react. I don't know exactly how I'm going to respond. Is it going to be a shuffle? Am I going to have to retreat? Am I going to, make a T-step and reaccelerate? And so it's like, how, I think what will probably emerge is some kind of agility test. But again, you can't make it consistent because it has to be reactive. So
right,
I think in terms of what's probably useful, that would probably be one of the more valuable things. But, in terms of the training process, where we try to get our athletes is to strip away some of those known things and see, can they retain technical competency that we've been drilling, in an uncertain environment. I don't expect it to be exact every time, right? They're not going to make the perfect, run step or something like that. Again, you don't know when you're going, you don't know how you're going, and you don't know, when, how, or what. Yeah. Just what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. So there's always that level of uncertainty. I think that's just sport in general. It's chaotic.
Yeah.
And it's hard to predict. So, what we do, I have to really appreciate is like, we don't do it like people get super excited about these cone drills or set up these real elaborate like ladder and hurdle and stuff. And I'm like, hey, fine, but let's appreciate that it is choreography. So are we just training this test? So yeah, to your point, it's like, I haven't solved this in my head about what is useful that isn't going to interfere with our training process, but still lets us establish some baseline. And I think what I'm probably going to arrive at is something that, hey, these physical attributes are getting better,
right?
Which is a good sign. But I'm also very quick to clarify, like, they're getting this to translate for your athlete is not a guarantee, but this is a positive sign. It's kind of like, any medical screen, right? Like, these are good signs for delaying heart disease, but it's still possible for anyone,
You still could.
It's
gonna happen. That reminds me, like, I've got he's more of a friend now. But I do like some mentoring with him, and he's starting a doctorate in Australia. I believe down in Sydney. One of the things he's running is like he's explained it probably like 10 times to me, but I'm still can't like fully wrap my head around it. But what they've done is they've taken like GPS tracking systems and they like basically put them in your shoes. Right. And during like professional basketball games, like, I think the technology has been adopted by like the NBA and like some other like sports. I'm not 100% sure all of them. The big one's basketball right now, but they're utilizing that with playtime to see how people move, how they're on the court throughout this entire duration of a game. And so that could be something, like taking testing in this chaotic environment. Like, is there a performance throughout a season based off of like, and then like correlating training to that, like maybe how many times someone was able to jump higher in a chaotic, like game or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
Or how far they were actually able to, like laterally move, or how quick they could get down the court in this type of a setting, and then average those points out. And like, I think the big thing they're trying to do is like just create like algorithms to process the different types of movements that occur.
Yeah.
So that should be something. I mean, I know he's starting his doctorate here in the next like week or two. And that's like his big thing, is like trying to get this. But I think that's something that could be even more beneficial and would help, a coach create this foundation of testing, but without like wasting training time.
Yeah. Sports science is so fascinating.
Dude, it's crazy. And I just had a podcast with Luke Tolick. He's more bodybuilder, but he was telling me, like, we were talking about like Australia versus the US, and I'm like strength and conditioning. And like, I was telling him, I was like, man, like, I feel like every Australian coach I talk to, like, they're on our level in America, if not a little higher in a lot of ways. He's like, I completely agree. He's like, we're definitely like trying to one up the US in terms of like the research. He said the only thing that's holding them back is just the fact that they don't have like collegiate sports. Like, that's the biggest hindrance. They just have kind of like these, it's just like professional and that's it. Like, whereas like in collegiate sports, you can do so much more testing and play around with this stuff. So those Australians, man, they're doing some crazy stuff.
Yeah. You know what I think though, is like, even with all that data, it's like you get these algorithms and stuff, but like when you try to like retrofit that, like what's really going to change about the training? Like, I think we have like at least, for some ideas
training,
about
like your training probably would have changed. I think what you're doing is fantastic. But say a coach that's still looking at like top end strength or these linear, like it may not change your training, but it might change the industry in general and how they look at it. And then it's going to be like, well, why are we doing this shit? Like, when it's actually making people slower, or this, or like what's someone's squat match? Like, does that actually correlate to how high they can jump? Like, there's research around all that shit, but the industry's still the same way. Like, I cut you off. You were saying like,
no, man, to your point, it's like, okay, I mean, how much do you think Barry Sanders squatted? Like, if we raised it by 100, would he have been better? It's like, I think he had all the strength he need. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I mean, that guy was an animal. Like, he just, it's not even strength at that point. Again, it's just like, it's athleticism. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I cut you off that time. Continue, man.
I was just going to say, like, I think the industry's gotten better in terms of like, we finally started to truly, and maybe this is just within the bubble that I follow, but like, we've separated, like, this is powerlifting, this is bodybuilding, this is strength and conditioning, and this is GPP, right? That's like kind of like pick your card, right? This is what you're going to do, and that's going to be what you're going to do. And whereas like even 10 years ago, it's like, I'm going to be a bodybuilder, but I want some power, so I'm going to do some Olympic lifting on the side and still like hit a match deadlift. And it's like, fuck, man, like, why am I picking all this? And trying to train it at the same time. Like, I thought I was like a fucking Navy SEAL or something. Like, it's like, it's just not how it works,
Yeah. I will say, I mean, one of the things that I get a lot of people is they want that hybrid approach, right? I think CrossFit really popularized that.
Yeah.
And I think for people who are not elite, like, I think you can chase strength and hypertrophy. I think most people can see an improvement in their aerobic base, and to some degree, a little bit of athleticism. Like, I've seen a lot of these things, but you have to be really tactical with how you allocate volume.
Right.
But I wouldn't prep for a powerlifting meet and do all those other things. But I think kind of if you look at all those capabilities, it's almost like you can bias the training to increase one. It's easier to maintain, so you can kind of hold and really pull back the volume on that while everything else comes up. And then you can kind of raise one, and you almost kind of do this kind of pattern. But I
Right.
think if everything is equal, right, then you have no priorities. But I think if you understand how to prioritize and retain just enough so that you're in striking distance of your capabilities, like I think it's very possible to do that. But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's hard to like, ride two horses with one ass. Like
Yeah.
you can't train for a powerlifting meet and a marathon at the same time. Maybe you can. I don't know. Maybe somebody's done it. Probably Alex Viata.
I mean,
But
but that's probably few and far between,
yeah.
like that's, I think it's just the like hustle or grind culture. And it's like, oh, you got to do everything. And it's like be the Renaissance, like weightlifter in a way. And it's like, as much as I want it to be that, like, I don't,
Mhm.
it, like, I've definitely been the one to like romanticize that in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, but where, especially in this like 2 year period where I've just been focusing on like muscle, like I just
Mhm.
want muscle right now.
Yeah.
And it's like when I really focused in on this process, it's been like exponential.
Oh yeah.
And it like there's other aspects that have like my strength has increased a ton, but that was probably like one of the biggest things I noticed. Like this was the lowest hanging fruit for me. Like I
Mhm.
had my athleticism, but like I could get pretty heavy with like my big four lifts,
Yeah.
but they weren't ever like impressive. It's like
Sure.
a 315 squat, and that was like for three. And it's like, how am I going to ever take this up? You know,
Mhm.
and then really like thinking about it, it's like I need to put on more freaking muscle, especially as it being a narrow. Like
Mhm.
I just have to have more
Yeah.
if I want to be able to do those things. But staying consistent, doing the same thing, the whole idea of like training should be boring. I don't think it's necessarily boring, but it is consistent. It's the same
Yes.
movements. I've been hitting the same movements forever, but like hell, man, I just did a low row machine today, and I started at like 70 pounds for a one arm row on that thing, and now I'm up to 150,
Yeah.
and it's like exponentially. Like I'm just ripping this weight. It's like, okay, if I would have tried to done a different type of lift or tried to do a bunch of running or all this other stuff at the same time as this,
Mhm.
like, like where's that energy actually going? Yeah.
Yeah. I think muscle building, you need that like full engagement and just the consistency. I think the tracking, the old school mentality of beating the logbook. Like, I just don't know that there are too many things better than that. Like,
Yeah.
within that, like hit the muscle you're trying to hit, don't swing the weight, but like that method works and it works really well.
It's simple.
Um,
It really
it's
is.
sim-
Like you don't have to do anything fancy, but it's like just stick. And I think it goes for a lot of things too. Like it's just definitely maybe appreciate how much the body wants to fight progress. I think,
yeah,
like it doesn't want to change, but
yeah,
with the slow incremental, you know, I'm going to add this much weight. I'm going to increase
yeah.
volume. I'm going to play with these little
Hmm.
things, but just over the course of 6 months, this is how it's
Yeah.
going to look. Like I think the same thing could probably go for plyometrics. It can go for all these everything in a lot of ways
Hmm.
until you hit that point where you're a true advanced lifter. Like
Yeah.
then that's when
Just
shit gets
it
crazy.
brings you back to my bodybuilding days. It's like I'd be in my parents' basement
Mhm.
and I'd like pray before the encyclopedia of bodybuilding, pump while watching Pumping Iron.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Extra
So you
pre-workout.
you
Like,
you're just turning 30, right?
yeah.
So do you remember all the Animal Pack ads? The guy that had
Animal
the
fat.
sock hat over, and he would be doing like squats and leg extension and like boots,
Yes. I know
and the dude
exactly
was
what you're
just super jacked. Like those would be hanging up, and I'd have to like just pay homage to it
pledge
before I'd start
allegiance to
lifting. Yeah.
him.
But man, it would get you in that mindset of like just crushing the workout.
Mhm.
And I not in this wild sense, but just this like to
Methodical. Like,
dig and have this level of output and commitment and discipline and just embracing the pain a little bit. And, I know, again, it's like, I want to revisit, like, we talk about this, early position and recapturing stuff. And it's not wussy training. Like,
No,
it still can be hard and we can still push, but yeah, man, it gets me fired up. Like, I just need to get back to that.
well, it's combined. I mean, that's what I do with the Broken to Beast program. It's like, if you can hit that stuff and respect it 60 to 80% of the time, like in a lift, but it's still hard training, like that goes a long way. And, say you just dedicate a couple months to that, that then allows, like, it gives you such a good foundation to then be an idiot in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And like, I'm going to go max out some of these lifts for 4 weeks and like actually do a true strength block. Like, I mean, that's the most beneficial thing I've found, is that because I respected those things, I did my due diligence. I kind of got my foundation of expansive heel strike stuff for a while. That then allowed me to move into compressive things and like get stronger because of those things I did, a couple months ago, even last year. And then I'm still respecting, I'm still tapping into it. I still revisit it at times, but it's, I don't like completely, I don't know. It's like, I drink coffee. I'm going to have my 1 cup a day, but I'm not going to drink 4 of these every single day and just go off the handle. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like some moderation in the training, respect both sides of it. Whatever, you could look at it as like woo-woo Buddhist type stuff, yin and yang. Like, it's just know when to push and, accelerate and decelerate in some ways. But
yeah, I just almost want to do a program where it's like all machines and just like straight pump work. And
literally what I've been doing.
The opposing days, like do my sprints and stuff.
Oh, I've just been hitting that. Like, I don't have the sprints, but like right now I'm like #max out machines and just like grind work, like 4 and 5 sets of 8 to 10 and just go ham. And
people might find this really odd. And I think Ron Haruska would probably just shake his head at me. But when we would go out of town for the PRI conferences, like me and the guy that used to work for me, we would go to, like a Lifetime Fitness or the Gold's Gym in the area. And because, we're in like a functional gym, it's power racks, it's barbells, like we would just do machines. And I remember like we went up there, it was like, we're going to hit like 30 sets of back. Like right before PRI, where it's like the complete antithesis of everything we're about to learn. But I'm like, it was fun. Like, I just love training like that. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, do you realize? I'm like, this is so great. I'm like, I don't feel cashed out after, 4 sets of back from dumbbells. It's like, I can hit so many sets and still feel fresh. So it was like, they had a whole row, like knotless and hammer strength. I'm like, I'm doing a couple sets on every machine. And I mean, we just ran the table, but it was fun, man. I don't know. I enjoy it. Like, I mean, I'm still kind of like, I say I'm a recovering meathead. I love the athleticism. Like, my primary sport's jujitsu right now, which is completely different, but like, there's still a part of me. It's like, I still love broing out. Like, it's just a good time.
Well, and again, it's just, I gotta, like, this is where I talk shit about PRI, because again, they don't like the lift, and I get it. It's their rehab, their rehabilitation, 100%, like, made sense. But I will definitely take broing out and being strong as fuck over positionally correct any day. Like, I think there's just way more benefit to being strong and resilient and your joints and all that stuff on this side. You can respect both. And that's the beauty of it all, is just being able to like work in the gray, respect both, like, because of my experience with PRI with Bill's stuff, especially like, I almost think of like, Bill talks about like external rotation on both sides and internal rotation. And it's like, when you're compressed or compensated, like, you're always here, and like your spectrum for movement is so small. Whereas like, when you use these methodologies, like, it just gives you that much more room to work from. And then you can do dumb bro stuff a lot more.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the way I look at it. It's like I can go ham on a machine and it's not going to completely throw me off and
Right.
make me be compressed and all this other stuff like it used to make me in a way. I don't know if you've had the same experience with that, but that's just
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, it's like, heavy lifting. I mean, it's, you go back to like the simplest of rules, the set principle.
Mhm.
I tell people this all the time. The worst thing you can do under heavy loads is move and rotate. And so if you do it enough, you stop rotating.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of that simple.
Right.
It's not, but it is. So it's like, just throw enough of the other stuff in and you're fine. Like, it can really be that simple. And again, that becomes more the elegance of like, we understand a lot of the nuance. We understand a lot of the principles, but
Mhm.
just give different exposure to different, demands, and you'll start to regain some of those abilities. Do I need to move? Like, I've been doing yoga my whole life? Absolutely not. Like, I've never seen a yoga person that's strong,
Right.
very strong. And I don't want that. Like, I'm okay being on the other end of the spectrum, but it's like, I'll do enough of that stuff to recapture, a little bit more IR, a
Mhm.
little bit of rotation, and then I'm good. Like, just enough to give me some bandwidth.
Yeah. You should run the Broken to Beast program, man. I think you'd like it. It's got enough bro in it. Like I think
I might take
like
you.
it.
I might take you up on that.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
It's 3 months. Like I got
Okay.
it'll take you through some like good stuff. And I mean, I packed on some serious mass using it. So, but
Let's go. I'm in. I'll do it.
hell yeah, man. And I think you'll like the spreadsheet too. I'm like that spreadsheet I put way too much time into, but yeah, man, I think we're kind of getting here at the end, but Brian,
sure.
how about you hit us with the socials, man? Where can we find you? All that good stuff.
Shit, I'm not on there much. It's at Coach Ryan Patrick on Instagram. Maybe once a week I'm on there. I keep telling myself I'm going to commit, but
dude, you're busy. You're brick and mortar. And then you got the Rebel Performance stuff though, right?
Yeah. Doing Rebel. Love it. Great crew.
Mhm.
Great leadership. James, team that's over there is phenomenal. So learn a lot from those guys. And just happy to be a part of it. It's kind of the best case scenario because I let James kind of take the reins on that. I just show up and coach. And so love working with the people that we have. It's definitely, I think it's nice because everyone there likes to train. So it's just like one big happy family, man.
There you go. Nice. And then your gym is located in Northern Kentucky.
We're about 10 miles south of Cincinnati. So
that's right. You're by the airport and all that.
It's Erlanger technically.
Yeah.
But really, for those not in the know, Northern Kentucky is just a giant conglomerate of suburbs of Cincinnati. So
exactly. So you can't really even say like Kentucky with it, but
yeah, I just tell people I'm from Cincinnati. I go, yeah,
yeah,
it works.
All right, man. Well, hey, thank you for the time. And
man, it's great to catch up. Thank you.
Yeah, totally, dude. Yeah, we'll have to get a lifting session in soon.
You're welcome anytime. Come down.
Hell yeah, man. All right. Well, we will see you guys in the next one.